This is CDBG Bootcamp Module 4, DCA Forms 1 through 13, and Application Organization.
A Georgia CDBG application generally includes the DCA forms, backup documents for those forms, and any other information that you think will help make the case for your project. Today I'm going to describe the forms and give a little information on application organization. CDBG forms are available on the DCA website at the displayed URL. To browse through to these forms, go to the DCA website, www.dca.ga.gov, select CDBG, scroll down most of the way through the page until you see the Application and Awards heading. Under that, select CDBG Application Toolkit, and then near the top you should see the CDBG Forms link where you have the forms. Instructions are also available in the 2017 Applicant's Manual, pages 60 to 71. DCA 1 gives some brief information about the grant. Starting with the top three columns, the first thing we want to know is who is applying for this grant, what community. Next, and where is that located? The next one over is who wrote this grant and what's their contact information in case we have questions. The third column across, the grant administrator, if known. If you have already gone through the procurement process or are using an RC as the grant administrator, so don't need to, we would like to know who the grant administrator is. Below that, we want a brief description about your project. As I say, please be brief. If you look through our webpage, you'll notice that we've put out some description lists for applications received and funded. The descriptions we're using in those are a good example of what we're looking for here. We need to know the type of applicant. Is it a city? Is it a county? Is it a joint, which would be city or county? Or is it a regional application with multiple governments? We want to make sure you've enclosed a map. We want to know how many months you're planning on this grant taking and give us the time frame. As a general rule, this should be 2 years or less. We want to know how much money you're requesting and the basic type of activity. And then, of course, we want the signature of the authorized representative, generally the chief local official. On the previous slide and this one, I've highlighted in red the areas where the form has changed from last year to this year. We got rid of the applicant address. We believe at this point we already have addresses for all of the local governments throughout the state. Instead of the census tract and block groups, we're now asking for the project block group IDs, and I'll show you how you can pick those up in a minute. We also this year have added Longitude and Latitude, and again, I will show you where you can get that information. Block group ID, longitude, and latitude are displayed on the same maps that give the applicant concentrations that we require for another part of the application. And here is the URL. Once you've opened the map, browse to your community. You should see borders breaking up the different census tract block groups. If you click on the map inside one of those anywhere, a window like this should appear. If you notice, as I have circled in red here, you should be able to see the 12-digit block group ID. Do that for each of the census tract block groups that are involved in your project and give those to us on DCA 1. Anytime you have the concentration maps open, you should be able to, as you move your mouse, you'll notice in the lower left there are two numbers that change as you move the mouse. Hover the mouse over the project location, or roughly, and then record those two numbers. Those are your longitude and latitude. One of those numbers will be negative. Please make sure to leave it as a negative number and display it that way on DCA 1. DCA 2 gives us some basic information on what you plan on actually accomplishing with your project. You're going to tell us the proposed accomplishments. Find the activity or activities in the left-hand column. Then to the right of that, tell us how many people, housing units, or jobs you're planning on benefiting with your grant, and how many of those are low to moderate income. You will generally only have one of those categories for single activity grant. For a multi-activity grant, generally you have housing and either people or jobs, most commonly people. DCA 4 is where you explain the problem that you plan on addressing. Although I'm only showing one page here, as you notice at the bottom, we have page blank of blank pages. Feel free to give us multiple pages. If there's only one, chances are you haven't given us enough detail. DCA 5 is where you explain how you're going to address those problems you've just given us. Again, I'm only showing one page here, but generally you're going to have multiple pages to describe what you plan on doing. DCA 6 gives us some additional information on your beneficiaries. In column 1, please enter the CDBG activity number. The next form, Form 7, has those numbers. In column 2, the total number of persons that the activity will serve. Number 3, the number of those persons that are minorities. Number 4 will be auto-calculated, doing the math there for the non-minorities. Number 5, column number 5, is the number of low and moderate income persons the activity will serve. The percent of persons who are low and moderate income will be automatically calculated. The amount of money in column 7 that will be allocated to that activity, and then it'll take the percentage of people who are low mod and multiply the amount of money, and it'll automatically fill in column 8 for you. Beneath the columns 1 through 5, you'll notice some space that says describe methodology or use an attached sheet. Definitely here we're looking for information on how you conducted the surveys. As you note on the bullet point, please use DCA's acceptable survey methodology in Appendix C for guidance. I would definitely read through this if you're not very familiar with it. Please provide a copy of the actual survey form that was used. Beyond that, it's really helpful to us if you will number the households you had to survey and show us by household in tabular format how each one of these fit the different categories. Make sure to use the most current income limits. Form DCA 7 gives us a relatively simple way to view your budget. For a single activity grant, you will only use one of the columns, B, C, or D. For a multi-activity, you'll be using B, and additionally either C or D as well. This form is continued on the next slide. And again, for the top part, Part A continued, you'll see additional budget codes. Part B at the bottom, please make sure to include all of your match and leverage under the appropriate category. DCA 8, the budget analysis, should show CDBG funds as well as other funds generally referred to as match and leverage. Under column 1, please list the budget code and a brief description. As an example, P03J02 sewer facilities. Column 2 should have a little more description of what's being done. Column 3 would be any CDBG funds going into that activity. Column 5A will be the other funds going into that activity, and 5B will be the source of that, whether it's the city or county that's receiving the grant, in kind from a grant administrator or engineer or some other source of funding. If it is match, also please list that in that column. When setting this form up, if you have space, it's generally best to leave one or more lines between each individual budget item so that it's easier to read. All CDBG projects are subject to environmental review. DCA 9 gives us some basic information that makes it easier to determine what level of environmental review is required. This is the second page of DCA 9, just additional questions. And the third page just giving some additional information on other things that might be necessary depending upon the answers to some of the questions. Along with the environmental, you also have to check for historic preservation implications. This is a 4-page form, and one copy of this form should be sent with your application, and 1 copy should go to HBD for review. They have up to 30 days to respond. If you receive a response before the application is due, please include that in your application to DCA. Otherwise, you'll need to submit that to us once you receive it. Although tribal consultation is not necessarily required for all grants, in reality, anything with actual construction, which is pretty much all grants, will require tribal consultation. I put the URL for the site at the top. If you go to that link, you can then click on Georgia, select the county, and it will give you a list of the tribes that you would need to contact. DCA 10 is a list of certified assurances. It's 4 pages long, basically a list of rules you agree to follow if you're funded. On page 4, it must be signed by the chief elected official and attested by the clerk or another authorizing official. DCA 11 is a cooperating agreement that's necessary if multiple governments are applying for the grant together. Most of our grants are submitted by a single local government, but if you are involved in a joint 2-community grant or regional with more than 2 communities, then we want to make sure we have signatures from each of the local governments acknowledging their involvement in the award. DCA 12 gives basic map instructions. There is nothing to fill out on this form. Please do provide the maps as listed here. The concentration maps have become much more detailed over the last few years, and there's a separate presentation that gets into much greater detail on that. Rights compliant certification gives us some basic information to determine that the local government is hopefully following the appropriate employment rules. Also to let us know if there have been any complaints filed against the community. Especially if there's been a complaint, please give us additional information. This form must also be signed by the chief elected official and the person preparing the certification. On organization, please put the resolution for the grant, the SAM documentation, and civil rights certification behind DCA 1. We need to look over these early on, and that makes them easy to find. DCA 4 needs to be addressed. Since we have the narrative there, it's also nice to have the pictures grouped with that so we can look through them at the same time as we read through the narrative. The budget is DCA 8. That's a logical place to put the match letter. The preliminary engineering report, again, just to make it real easy to find, we'd suggest that as the final appendix for the application. And certainly throughout the application, we greatly appreciate tabbing or at least using colored paper or some sort of separator between the different forms, documentation, and appendices so that we can more easily move through it in an organized fashion.
And the front slide that you see here is we have a new source and use Excel spreadsheet. It has the formulas already locked into the spreadsheet. All you need to do when you're filling out the application is fill out the column on the left for the project activity, and fill out the top row as far as where the source of the funds are, and then you just fill out the financial figure within the grid. And the formula will automatically calculate into the gray areas the sum of those numbers to help you with the balance sheet on the source and use statement. As I indicated, I want to help clarify the information that we're requesting on an application when we're talking about supplemental information. Within each EIP application, whether it be an infrastructure grant or a loan, or whether it be a redevelopment fund application, within the application itself there are 3 pages that are the supplemental information that we are requesting. Here's an example of the first page of the EIP Supplemental Information. This has been in the application for quite some time now, but this is just a 3-pager, and it requests specific supplemental information related to the job creation, tax revenue estimated to be generated, things of that nature. In addition to the 3-page supplemental information within the application, we have a supplemental exhibit of items for an application. The slide in front of you now shows the EIP public infrastructure supplements. These could be things that are items such as the cost estimate, the commitment letter from the company, a business synopsis. These are in addition to. So you have within the application the 3-page supplemental form, but also you have exhibits that are included with the EIP application, and this is the example of the supplemental information for an EIP program and the exhibits required. This slide shows the EIP supplements for direct loans. They're almost twice as many exhibits, but again, a loan has a different assessment. Our credit team will look at some of the information submitted. Other than the commitment letters, we're asking for cash flow projections, affiliation of subsidiaries, just other financial information as far as information required so our credit team can conduct some due diligence as far as the financial wherewithal of the company. That's the first page of the supplements for the direct loan application. And this is the RDF application supplemental page. These next 2 slides show the supplements requested for an RDF application related to a direct loan. There are 18 items requested. The first page requests items exhibits such as business plan, a resolution, a source and use statement, a commitment letter from the company, items along those lines.
Should you have any questions regarding any of the topics discussed in this module, please submit those questions via email to cdbg.biz@dca.ga.gov, and please use the subject line Bootcamp Questions. We will provide answers in reply and at the workshop.